Right. So hello and welcome to this Fireside chat from EcoITCon. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the folks joining across the globe. My name is Manish Potdar, and we are bringing a very interesting subject today on supply chain management and sustainability. For this discussion, we have a privilege of joining us, Mr. Pinak Kulkarni. He's a supply chain strategist and a founder of a company named Spark. A very warm welcome to you, Pinak, to this discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manish. It's always a privilege to add a couple of cents of what I know to the industry.
Sure. I'll quickly introduce Pinak. Pinak is a founder of the company Spark, as I said, specializing in consulting and training around supply chain management. Pinak has imparted around 350 plus training programs so far across the globe, trained around 7,000 personnel through this training. He has been a regular speaker at various forums and conferences, and he's an active blogger as well. So it's a privilege to have Pinak with us. Now, if you take a subject of supply chain management, Pinak and everyone, what we've seen over the time, there has been an evolution in the space. But predominantly, this evolution has been in the areas of productivity improvement, digital transformation of the processes, and delivering faster and better, right, so far. However, the subject of sustainability, which is equally important, has been on a backseat and a back burner during this evolution. However, as of today, if you look at it, this subject has become a grave concern across the industry. So true for supply chain management as well. And in fact, if you look at some of the researches, what we've observed is around 8 to 10% of world's carbon emission is contributed by this industry. Definitely a great concern unless until we focus very seriously on this subject. On an average, less than 50% of the companies do not measure their suppliers' sustainability parameters. Right? In fact, if I look at it, almost 30% or less than 30% companies actively engage with their partners on improving sustainability, but on an average, this subject has been ignored, and hence is an important subject for us for deliberation. If I take a very basic stage, Pinak, right? In a broad terminologies, what is this sustainability for a supply chain management? And if I really take a simplistic definition, it's all about ensuring processes, activities, all the steps involved in producing, transporting, distributing, and of course the logistic aspects, being very sustainable, environment friendly, and safe, and so on and so forth, right? But that's at a very broad level. You know, the first question for you, Pinak, is if you want to go slightly deeper into it, how do you really see sustainability for this domain, and how do you really dissect if you want to prioritize sustainability under this industry today?
It's actually a very good question because when we talk about sustainability in supply chain, the need of the industry today is to have a broader perspective of looking at what is sustainability. To be very honest with you, Manish, supply chain sustainability probably has a very simple definition to practice in the industry today. The rate at which I consume the irreversible resources versus the rate at which I can replenish those resources. If the rate at which I'm consuming is faster than the rate at which I can replenish, we are becoming unsustainable. That's the simplest way to understand sustainability in supply chain. Because if you really look at supply chain, on one side, we have the demand, which is represented through the consumer or the customer. And on the other side, we have the supply side of the supply chain, which you mentioned. The supply side of the supply chain is basically the warehousing part of it, the shop floor part of it, the procurement part of it, supplier relations. That is the supply side of the supply chain. And then there's a demand side of the supply chain. Now, the whole topic of sustainability has to be perceived beyond just anecdotal examples. Uh, Holistic perspective of supply chain would mean that to service my customer, what he values in the supply chain is A, time, B, cost, C, quality, and 4, service. I keep it very simple. I call it as TCQS approach of supply chain. Now, the demands of the supply chain actually drives the rest of the supply chain. So what has happened over a period of time and the evolution in this domain over the last 70 odd years, which is Second World War and post Second World War, has been that give the customer what he wants, what he values. Yeah. And because of that, we have got a contemporary approach of supply chain, which is the modernized way of running a supply chain practice. On the top of that layer of the practice is the layer of climate change, which is being, I mean, to be very honest with you, nowadays, the moment I speak sustainability, people directly jump onto climate change. And I personally have a belief that climate change is a subset of sustainability. Okay. Because the definition of sustainability is very simple. The rate of replenishment versus the rate of consumption. If your rate of consumption is faster than the rate of replenishment, you're causing damage to the society and nature at large. So there's a modernization of the supply chain, which is causing sustainability issues. There's this climate change as a result of that. There's a lot of redundancy in the supply chain, which is generally referred to as waste. Redundancy is a consumption of a resource which does not produce anything which is productive. There's a waste element to it. And all of this has naturally, see, please understand, we live in a capitalist world. So everything has to be justified in terms of its investment. So the sustainability part of it, in my opinion, has to be viewed in this context of 4 pillars, supported with excellent governance structure and technology. Absolutely. That's really the way to look at sustainability. And just to quote an example for you, let's take the piece of governance, or let's take the piece of technology. Now, you take one of those. I mean, just for our discussion point, I'll start with maybe governance. Later, I'll touch upon technology. Governance necessarily is a factor where it is left to the management of the company. Now, management of the company, you can also take management of a country, which is called as the central government of a country. Now, the driving force for sustainability is that governance. Then the rest of the will fall into its place.
Oh, this is very interesting. I think you tried simplified at such a simplistic level, right? You start digesting it better. But Pinak, and I think the last point that you touched upon is the broader governance at a country level, right? It's more you can call it as like a geographical diversity. Now, if I take a step forward in the conversation, the recent events, I would say disruptions, so-called, right? Whether it is a COVID for 2 years, or it is the current Russia and Ukraine war, right? And these are the what we hear a lot is that these disruptions have really resulted into disruption of the overall supply chain ecosystem as well, right? So now while there is an attempt to bring sustainability glued into the conversation, but at the same time, here are some deterrents coming in play, right? Where these political dimensions or these calamities come in play. How do you see that's being balanced today and taken forward?
This is a great question. I'll tell you why. The journey of sustainability, as I said, is a function of consumption versus replenishment. Right. Now, why is this a great question? Is because the recent history of disruptions, which you mentioned, it can be a COVID-related disruption, or it can be this current conflict in the world, which we see. It has actually derailed the journey of sustainability to a certain extent. One step back, I talked about governance. Now, governance actually created the right framework for the world to look at sustainability. I'll give you an example, and then I'll come to this context of the recent disruptions. What did governance do? Governance said that, look, we are all into this together, and we'll try to find a way out of it. That's where, in 2010, you had this Copenhagen summit, and all of them agreed to that. So worldwide, there's a consensus saying that, look, we are in a context of the evolution of the capitalist world, which requires us to be into this together, and we need to figure it. So governance was put in place. That's a different story, which probably during our conversation, if we hit onto it, I'll talk about it. But what happened is that journey got disrupted in 2020. Put yourself into the shoes of a supply chain manager who was scrambling over the world to figure out where he's going to get his raw material from. What happened in 2020 is a reversal of a large phenomena called globalization. Post the Second World War, we got this GATT into place, GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. First effort in this world for a trade which can be global. WTO came into picture in 1994. It's the same thing which is GATT, which made way for WTO. So what we saw is a globalized world where consumption point can be anywhere, the resource is anywhere. And as long as the economic price to be paid for the resource makes sense to me, I'll not create redundancy in the supply chain.
Right.
So make it easy for you to understand. If China is able to supply me something at a cost which is competitive enough for me not to put up a plant in US, I'll not put up a plant in the US, I'll procure it out of China. The reason is the resources in China, the consumption point is in US. And that gets to globalized world. Comes 2020 with COVID-19, internalization of governments. Everyone wants to secure himself. And that, in my opinion, created a context for each of the country to safeguard its own interest. Now, what it has done for all of us is, it has probably had an impact, which, in my personal opinion, is going back a few decades at least.
Yeah.
Governance front, I don't see a problem. On the governance front, even the COP27, which happened, a lot of commitments have been given. Every government is talking about its commitment. Some governments have given commitment towards being carbon neutral also. So I'm not worried about governance piece. What I'm worried about though is, from my supply chain perspective, it was a very, very good way of not creating a non-sustainable supply chain because of globalization. Now, after 2020, you are seeing that every country wants to secure its own supplies. They want that entire journey of globalization has now given way to national interests. On top of it, you had this 24th February 2022, when you started the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Countries realize, oh God, we are in trouble. Why? Because now, just to quote an example for you, if I'm in Germany and I buy gas from Russia, and now because of EU, I may not want to buy more gas from Russia, what do? I'm a gas-based economy, and there's an infrastructure which was created. Nature has got more gas in Russia, and nature has got more consumption in Germany. What do we do with it? They are saying that we will now start our nuclear power plants, which were kept at rest because the gas was available, and it was available really cheap. Gas prices have times. Now, where is the non-sustainable part of it? The non-sustainable part of it is, due to the recent disruptions, supply chains may end up creating redundancy.
Yeah.
What was closed is now being started. That is not a very good news for me, because as a supply chain practitioner of sustainability, I don't want the world to extract more natural resources.
Right.
That is something that all of us as practitioners of supply chain are grappling with. In India, we call it Atmanirbhar Bharat. Very great initiative, no doubt about it. But while we undergo Atmanirbhar Bharat, the sustainability of the supply chain is in question, because now we are also going to create more redundancy.
Right.
So I think that's one large piece that I personally see happening in the sustainable supply chain. Ideally speaking, we don't want to create more redundancies across the nodes of supply chain. I mean, I gave you a very complicated example. It may sound slightly difficult to digest, but that's the reality of a world which is post 2020 and now post 2022. And globalization has become a reality. So it's going to have a negative effect.
So I think while one side this is definitely a concerning situation that we are into, but on the brighter side, we've also seen in the recent past a lot of technology development that has happened,
Yes.
Which is in the direction of helping,
Yes.
sustainability as a domain. Would you want to cite some of the examples that you've seen, in industry that have helped sustainability?
Yeah. I mean, in my own domain of work, where I am actually associated with a lot of companies as a consultant, and as you rightly mentioned, I do a lot of trainings in the domain also. Technology is helping us a great way. When there are a lot of good examples of how technology is solving the problem. I'll make it easy for us with maybe a few case studies to understand, because uh, I firmly believe that if I want to create a sustainable supply chain, it only rests on that pillar of technology. I mean, I call it Sita to make it easy. I mean, nothing to do with Sita as in the Hindu tradition of Ram and Sita. I use Sita as an acronym: simultaneous, instantaneous, transparent, and accurate.
Hmm.
Why is this very important to the sustainability initiative of companies? If I'll give an example, if you buy a car today, and I tell you that look, there's a company in India which is one of the leading manufacturers of batteries in India, and they tell you that look, Mr. Manish, when you buy the car, please don't worry about it, because for the battery, A, you don't pay us upfront, and B, I've got a solution which sends data of the health of the critical quality parameters of your battery every 10 seconds to a central server. Because it's an IoT based solution, it also helps me track where your car is. You don't have a problem of saying that, look, I stay in a city which is X, I'm traveling to a city which is Y. And, as a consumer of the product, what is your expectation? You sit in the car, you push the button, and the car should start. You don't care for anything else. And here is a company which says that, look, we are going to use a solution which allows us to take care of the critical to quality parameters for performance of the battery, which prolongs the life of the battery, at the same time avoids a breakdown maintenance of your battery. And it does not matter where you are, sir, because my company has got a technicians network across the country. You don't need to tell my technicians, sir. The IoT based solution sends data to my server based on the location of your vehicle. It sends the data to the technician who comes to know, look, this vehicle parked at so and so location has this problem. All that you need to do is give a OTP, which pops up in your SMS. The fellow exactly knows what the problem is. He comes, services your battery, and before a breakdown happens, the health of the battery is taken care of. Now, that's something which a lot of people have missed in the sustainability journey. They think that, look, this is application of IT to supply chain.
Automation, yeah.
But this is sustainability because I'm helping you prolong the life of your battery, which in other terms is going to now use lesser natural resources of the world to produce those batteries. And while I'm on the topic of battery, I think another parallel example which comes to my mind is uh, look at supply chains and transporters. Transporters have large fleet, isn't it? A fleet of 100 vehicles, a fleet of 500 vehicles. So you look at someone who is like Gati, for example. Gati has a fleet, if I'm not wrong, of 4,500 vehicles. VRL Logistics, more than 3 to 5,000 vehicles. So what is the major concern for these guys? The major concern for these guys is if the life of the tire can be prolonged without having a breakdown or without losing the efficiency at which the vehicle needs to move. See, if my tire does not have the right pressure, if my tire does not have the right maintenance, it increases the fuel consumption.
Right.
Increasing fuel consumption has a relationship with sustainability. Company, which is a European company, which has a business solution in India for this. So next time when the fleet owner goes and says that, look, I want to buy a fleet of, let's say, 50 trucks or 100 trucks, you may get an option that you don't pay for the entire truck. You pay for the truck minus the tires. And it comes with a AMC where this company, which is a tire manufacturer, will ensure tire rotation happens, will ensure wheel alignment happens, will ensure the wear and tear is kept to minimum, because they'll do the routine maintenance of the tires. And if they realize that, okay, because of the suspension, the tire has a higher wear and tear, they'll tell the OEM. Now, that is where, the sustainability part comes into picture, that the OEM comes to know proactively that this vehicle had a suspension problem. If I attended to it in the past, it was a reactive maintenance, not a proactive maintenance. The net result of all of this is you consume more fuel on the road. It takes longer for your vehicle to reach from place A to place B. And all of that actually adds to the negative effects on sustainability. Examples which I see, I mean, I just quoted a couple of, but technology is really helping today. I mean, one of the major areas, Manish, in my opinion, is recycling of used material. And unfortunately or fortunately, India has not been a very progressive state on that front. I mean, if you look at stats of recycled water usage in India, we recycle only 4% of what nature gives us. Similar cases with, for example, metals. Where do they go? I mean, they just land up in some scrapyard into the gray market. Now, if this recycled material is available for consumption to the OEM, it will naturally reduce the stress on the ecosystem, which is the natural resources ecosystem. So there's a.
You're essentially saying, the automation may not directly help, but indirectly contribute. So
yes,
the measures of sustainability can both sides, or direct contribution to improving sustainability, or indirectly effect on sustainable, point forward. I think, quicker to move last subject, Pinak, is around the challenges and the barriers. I think the industry is not, the whole situation doesn't seem to be very hunky-dory. However companies want to implement all the measures, there are still challenges, there are still barriers into it. Would you want to highlight one or two, critical barriers in this whole initiative of sustainability?
Yeah, I'll give it to you in a framework to begin with, as a thought process. Take it as a thought process. One of the largest things about capitalist world always is I invest only if the returns justify the investment. Full stop. And the ROI is not great. I mean, if I were to look at it, I mean, apart from the compliance, there's no real incentive for me to talk on that front as a sustainability initiative. Point number one. Point number two is, and I think this is a global problem rather than being a local problem. The global problem is the imbalance, because the point at which you're generating or you're emitting more carbon in the environment is not the point where you're consuming. Yeah. What's the world, and this is a very simple understanding that I wish to share with you. Look at the global economy. It's an $80 trillion economy, 22 trillion US, 16, 17 trillion is China, 17 trillion or round about that is the entire EU. Out of the EU is UK, I think roughly $3 trillion. Now, if I add 22 plus 17 of EU, that's 39. You add UK, another 3 trillion. So I'm talking about 50% of the global GDP amongst these three clear zones: US, EU, and England, UK. Yeah. They are the largest consumption points, which means if they were to produce what they were to produce, they would have emitted more to the environment. It happened because of globalization and in the quest of being cheaper. See, the supply chains of the world have always been focused on wanting to be cheap. And in the quest of wanting to get it cheaper, we pushed all the production to economies like China, to economies like India, to economies like South Africa. Now, these are the places from where you are generating the largest amount of carbon emissions. Yeah. Why these guys, or why these countries? These countries, because they were the lowest cost countries in the world. We call them as LCCs. Now, when the West says, West in the sense EU or US, says that, look, all of us have to work on sustainability. The poor guys sitting in these countries say, look, sir, we were not the reason for the problem. You are the reason for the problem. You consume more. Yeah. Now, if you consume more, someone had to produce it. So we are happy. Look, you have recognized there's a problem here. And because you've recognized, we are happy to take steps, but we don't have the money to take those steps. You three large chunks are 50% of the world GDP. So we want you to fund our initiatives, which is a demand, which is a fair demand. That I'm ready to put money, I'm ready to take steps to reach a carbon neutrality goal. But for that, I need money, I need technology, and funding and technology, both of them are available in those countries, which are the largest consumer countries. And at this stage of supply chain, there's no incentive for those guys to pay these guys. So even though they have committed $100 billion a year since 2010, we are into end of 2022, 13 years gone, which means they should have given something like $1.3 trillion to these nations for working on technology solutions for lowering the carbon footprint. Nothing has come so far. And I'll give you a stat which can be helpful to you. The global GDP is 80 trillion. Total savings of the globe is around 20 trillion. Statistics. Now, what do I need? I need $3 to $5 trillion every year as a globe to work on sustainability in supply chain. $3 to $5 trillion is the investment which is required. Now, what is that? That's only 25% of the global saving actually. So it's a very less price to pay if you want to save humanity. But supply chain world still are preoccupied with finding cheap things, finding ways to circumvent the problem. Because of that, sustainability has not been a top agenda apart from compliance. I think time has come where people will start realizing that that's a very important thing for us to work on. Because to be very all supply chains at the end of the day are serving the consumer needs.
No, it's a very interesting point, Pinak, right? I think the lower ROI, the financial imbalance, and the keenness to support the initiatives are some of the critical barriers that has been there in the industry towards sustainability. But I think it was interesting conversation, Pinak.
Yeah.
You did touch upon some of the technology advancement, while we also talk about some of the challenges and barriers that are there, and the whole political scenario, which is kind of aggravating the problems that we have. But I'm sure we would have many more such opportunities to discuss and deliberate together on this subject, and we would love to have you back here. But in the interest of time, I would like to say thank you so much for being with us today. And the whole purpose of EcoITCon is to kind of build that awareness about sustainability, and today's conversation, you being here, did contribute to that objective as well. So thank you so much for coming here with us, Pinak. Thank you.